Guys, you don't ever pull fire alarms unless there's a fire, or if you have permission to do it during a fire drill, or if you have permission to test the fire alarm system, or if you have your own fire alarm in your private collection. If you pull the fire alarm in a public building when there's no fire, or you don't have permission to do it, then you can be fined or even arrested, which is not what you want. Pulling a fire alarm in a public building without authorization or evidence of a fire or a fire in general is a bad thing to do. So I wouldn't do it. In my state, it's an automatic class 1 misdemeanor to pull a false fire alarm in a public building. If you pull the fire alarm at school when there's no fire, you can get suspended from school or even expelled. You can be fined or even arrested. So, don't ever pull fire alarms in a public building unless there's a real fire. If there's a real fire, pull the fire alarm. If you have permission to do it during a fire drill at school, then you can pull it. Or if you have permission to test the fire alarm system, you can pull it. Or if you have your own fire alarm in your private collection, then you can pull it. But the bottom line is, don't pull fire alarms in a building unless there's a real fire. If you pull that fire alarm, you might be responsible for a panic. Also, if you pull the fire alarm, ink goes on your hands. Most buildings have security cameras these days, so you can't really get away with it if you pull the fire alarm. In fact, they're going to find out who pulled the fire alarm immediately. And I'll never forget the times when I was in elementary school. There were other kids in that school that pulled the fire alarm because they thought it was funny, but let me tell you something, it is not. It is not funny to pull fire alarms. It was this fire alarm pull box right here. And when it was activated, it sounded all the notification appliances, like this one, this one, this one, too. Also, this one. And something else you don't ever do is take the fire alarm off the wall or screw it or unscrew it. That is tampering. You can't do that. You definitely do not ever paint the fire alarm. If you paint the fire alarm, it's not going to be functional anymore to alert people in an emergency. That is also something you should never do to a fire alarm, is paint the fire alarm. If you want to do it with your own fire alarm, that is fine, but if you're doing it with a fire alarm in a public building, that is not okay. You don't ever paint a fire alarm device. You don't ever screw or unscrew the fire alarm and take it off the wall or ceiling. And you don't ever pull a pull station. Unless there's a emergency. You don't ever take down smoke detectors. You don't ever disable the entire alarm system. You don't ever smash the fire alarm. You do not ever put tape over the fire alarm. Horns, the reason why people put duct tape over the fire alarm horns is because they're so loud. You can't do that. You should never do that. You should never put duct tape over fire alarm horns. Something else you should never do is disable the strobe. You should never adjust the volume on the fire alarm. You should never adjust the coding on one. And you don't ever take the cover off of the fire alarm either. And see what's inside of it. Because that is tampering. You never do that to a fire alarm system. You don't break the fire alarm system ever. It is critical. And you certainly don't ever grab the fire alarm off the wall or ceiling and take it with you. You don't ever do that. That is stealing life safety equipment. You don't ever do that. Also, you do not ever write on the fire alarm. These are things you should never do. Also, if there's a Genesis device, you do not ever cross out the picture with the running man escaping from the fire, even though you don't like that, to see that icon all the time. That's also tampering. The stopper is over fire alarm pole stations. in public areas so we can reduce or totally prevent false fire alarms. With the stoppers, you don't ever uninstall the stoppers. And you don't ever put the stoppers in without turning on the alarm that's in the stopper. With a stopper cover and the alarm is off, people lift the stopper and pull the fire alarm because there is no alarm to catch them before they do it. The stopper alarm is there to prevent anyone from pulling the fire alarm as a prank. And something else you should never do is you should never take this sheet down from any building because it's there to make sure that you don't break the law. And you certainly don't ever disconnect the fire alarm control panel in a building either. You don't ever demolish the fire alarm. You don't ever do that. If you tamper with a fire alarm in any way, you can get arrested for tampering with life safety equipment. So, don't ever pull fire alarms in a public building unless there is a real fire, or if you have permission to do it during a fire drill, or if you have permission to test the fire alarm system, or if you have your own fire alarm, then you can pull it. And don't ever tamper with fire alarms in any way. Bye.